Right around this time last year, I made a video about how Nikola Jokic is quietly breaking the NBA's most valuable player race, and back then, it wasn't a very popular opinion amid strong seasons from Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo. But as we know, Jokic would eventually finish the regular season winning his second straight MVP award. But would you believe me if I told you that, right now, the Joker is once again starting to crawl his way on top of the MVP race in a much more convincing fashion than he did last season? Well, the thing is, the case for Jokic last season was pretty much centered around how he put up some ridiculously good advanced statistics while playing for a 6-seeded Denver Nuggets team, which he carried to 48 total wins for the season, despite the absence of his two best teammates in Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. However, such narrative also led most people to concede that it would take an even more out-of-this-world campaign from the Joker this season for him to be able to join Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, and Bill Russell as the only three-peat MVPs in NBA history. While at the same time, a more crowded field of MVP candidates this early has also made it even easier for the media to disregard another MVP-worthy season from Jokic simply because of voter fatigue. But should this really be the case? Well, for starters, let's look at the raw numbers. After playing 27 games so far, Jokic is averaging a near 25-point triple-double with 24.7 points, 11 rebounds, and 9.2 assists, while being the only player to rank in the top 20 of points, rebounds, and assists among all major MVP candidates, while also currently leading the Denver Nuggets to a 19-11 standing, which is tied for the best record in the Western Conference. Well, for sure, those numbers won't automatically put Jokic on top of the MVP race, as there's no standard category on how to choose a winner, but all I'm saying is that as long as the voters continue to consistently apply the voting criteria they used to select the MVP over the past couple of years this time around, both in terms of team standings, a player's value to his team, as well as the advanced and traditional stats, then Nikola Jokic should once again be near the top of the MVP race right now. So what's good, everyone, it's Real Balls here, and in this video, we'll objectively break down why the Joker is actually much closer to winning his third straight MVP award than most people think. But one sec, if you guys do happen to enjoy this video, please do me a favor by hitting that like button. It only takes a second of your time, but it will be much appreciated. So let's get to it. First, let's talk about how valuable Jokic really is to this Denver Nuggets team. Well, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are back on the roster, but the thing is, the on and off differential stats that were used to support Jokic's MVP case last season is actually even more supportive of his value to the team this time around. Cause looking at it, the Nuggets currently have a 115.8 offensive rating, which is the third best in the NBA, but when Jokic is on the floor, that number further skyrockets to 124 points per 100 possessions, which is equal to the best offensive rating in NBA history. However, when Jokic is on the bench, that number falls to 102.1 per 100, which would be the worst offensive rating recorded since that of the process 76ers of 2015 to 2016. But things get even more mind-blowing upon looking at Jokic's plus-minus numbers, as the Nuggets are a plus 28.9 points better per 100 possessions with Jokic on the floor, which isn't only the best on and off differential this NBA season, and not only the highest on and off mark recorded since the 03-04 season, but it's also almost 10 points per 100 possessions better than what Jokic recorded last season himself, which was also an NBA best. In other words, Jokic is even currently topping the otherworldly impact that he had for Denver last season, and when you compare his on and off differential to other top MVP candidates right now, you'll further see just how the Joker dominates in terms of team value, as his plus 28.9 efficiency is actually at least 12 points ahead of Steph Curry, who has the next best differential among all current MVP candidates. In addition, Denver's most commonly used starting lineup of Jokic, Murray, Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and KCP has proven to be really good, especially with Jokic on the floor, as when the Joker is on the court with any combination of those players, the Nuggets are outscoring opponents by 14.7 points per 100 possessions, which ranks in the 81st percentile of the entire NBA. But as soon as Jokic sits minutes on the bench, that lineup is getting beat by 15.7 points per 100, which isn't only the worst mark in the entire league right now, but is also 7.2 points worse than the number they produced when Jokic was on the bench last season. Then finally, in terms of overall net rating, which is another crazy stat area for the team, with Jokic on the floor, the Nuggets have a 10.8 net rating, which is at par with that of the championship-winning 91-92 Chicago Bulls. But when Jokic is on the bench, Denver has a minus 14.4 net rating, which is just a little bit higher than that of the 2011-2012 Charlotte Bobcats, who only won 7 regular season games. As you can see, all those stats are more than enough to support Jokic's case over the value of other MVP candidates to their teams, same as it actually was last season. The only difference is that the even greater on and off differential that Jokic brings this season as compared to last year is an even more convincing argument in favor of him, despite having superior teammates to carry the load when he's on the bench. I think this simply means that Jokic makes everyone better when he's on the floor, but when he's on the bench, somehow Denver just falls apart despite having a solid supporting cast. But sure, to be fair, we shouldn't make an MVP argument solely based on how bad an MVP candidate's team plays with or without him on the court, which is why I agree that Jayson Tatum's case shouldn't suffer just because his teammates are still capable with him on the bench. While of course the Celtics are clearly better with Tatum on the floor, but there's just no real metric that could measure how a team responds to a certain player's leadership. And for the record, I'm definitely a huge Jayson Tatum fan, and Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of my favorite players in the NBA. But I think simply voting for the best player on the best team or simply defaulting to the current best player in the NBA just won't do nowadays in terms of MVP voting, especially when we already have the luxury of looking into advanced statistics. So let's now move on to the advanced stats argument, and it's just that when you look into the 8 most commonly used and most inclusive advanced metrics in the NBA right now, such as the PER, win shares per 48, real plus minus, bucks plus minus, estimated plus minus, value over replacement player, win probability added, and Raptor, you'll see that Nikola Jokic actually ranks number 1 in 4 of those metrics, while Luka Doncic follows closely, ranking number 1 in 3 of those, which of course is expected considering how much their respective teams rely on those 2 players. But things get even more conclusive when you get the average rank of all the top MVP candidates based on all those 8 metrics, as you'll see that Jokic's 3.1 rank is still ahead of everybody else. Luka Doncic is actually a close second, but the Joker clearly sets himself apart from the others. So overall, I think there just isn't much argument against Jokic's advanced statistical case the same as last year, which once again proves that there's no other player with a more measurable impact on his team other than the Joker right now. But also, even looking into the more traditional numbers won't provide a real argument against Jokic's case either. Again, currently, Jokic is averaging a near 25-point triple-double on a ridiculously good 68.8 true shooting percentage, which isn't only the 3rd best true shooting mark in the NBA right now, only behind Nick Claxton and Grant Williams, but it's also even higher than the 66.1 true shooting mark that Jokic himself recorded last season. The difference though is that Jokic is attempting 15 shots per game, while Claxton and Williams are only averaging 13 field goal attempts combined. Plus, overall, Jokic's current shooting splits are also pretty similar from what he put up last season as a back-to-back MVP. The only thing that's really noticeable though is that he's averaging more than 2 fewer points per game compared to last season. However, I think it only corresponds to his slight decline in shot attempts and the slight increase in his assist numbers, which totally makes sense since Denver is getting back 28 field goal attempts per game this season from Jamal Murray and MPJ combined. I think this is also something that even further supports Jokic's MVP case, as in theory, his scoring should have fallen much further, but he's still currently getting points efficiently just as he did last season. With that said, it's just starting to become clearer that there just isn't any statistical case that can be made against Jokic, and the only thing that might be left to counter his MVP case is some sort of a narrative. Probably a narrative stating that it was harder for him to be this great last season because of the absence of Jamal Murray and MPJ. But should the return of those 2 players really make Jokic any less deserving of another MVP award? Well, just look into these numbers and decide for yourself. With Jokic on the floor, Denver is outscoring opponents by 8 more points per per 100 possessions this season than they did last season, and without him on the floor, the team is now losing by 5.3 more points per 100 than they did last season. So for sure, Jokic does have better teammates right now and he's making them even better, but they're just somehow much worse without him on the floor this time around. In other words, this season just provides more proof that if voters did reward Jokic for leading a 6th-seeded Denver Nuggets team last season, then there's no reason for them not to do it for the 3rd straight time, especially if the Nuggets continue to stay on top of the Western Conference, while also considering that both the advanced statistics and the on and off numbers also tell us that the Joker is even better this season. Well, sure, it's nice to have a fresh narrative and a new MVP, but if we're being consistent, then Nikola Jokic for sure should be much closer to winning his 3rd straight MVP award than most people think. So thank you guys if you made it this far into the video, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this is Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.